Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Food Hub's event, Future Food Framework Assurance Schemes, which is why we've stimulated you all to joining us, but I'm sure it's going to be more interesting than the title would suggest. To those of you who've attended our events before, welcome back. To those of you who are joining us for the first time, our objective with these sessions is to prepare the region, the Southwest region, to participate in the Future Food Framework, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. As I said, we're going to cram a lot into an hour, so we appreciate your patience. We will record this session, or we are recording this session, so if you shouldn't be here, turn your cameras off now, or if for any reason you don't want to be recorded, please turn your cameras off. But that means that obviously you can watch it and others can watch it later. Please give us your details and say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from, and also pose any questions in the chat as well. And we will be trying to take some of your questions today, but we might take some away and come back to you afterwards, and we'll give you some contact details a bit later. Just going through my housekeeping here, if anything else I've got to tell you. And yeah, just a brief outline of the event. So I'm delighted to welcome Anthony Manuel, who will join us shortly to give us his insight into the food and drink sector in the region. I'm then going to give you a bit of an update on the Southwest Food Hub. Then we'll hand over to Steve Ashworth, who will talk to us a little bit about what came out of last week's budget that might be affecting our sector. And then we're going to hand the reins over to the Defra team, who are going to then delve a little bit deeper into what might be changing in the world of assurance schemes. And then open up for some participation as to what, from a producer and from a procurer's perspective, and any other perspectives, might be useful to think about during this review of the assurance schemes. Just before we get going, we're going to run a quick poll because we want to know who's amongst us. So Ellen is just going to pop up a poll now. So please, if you can just let us know what sector or what title best fits where you are from. Okay, we'll just give that a few more seconds. Okay. Get rid of that one, Ellen, can we? Great. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Anthony Manuel, Conservative MP for Totnes and South Devon. Anthony's one of a number of MPs that have worked very closely with the Southwest Food Hub and the Future Food Framework, and made sure that people in Westminster are very aware of what we're up to. He's very passionate about the food and agri sector, and very determined to help us make the most of this opportunity. So it's time for change, Anthony, sorry, there goes my first faux pas. Get that on the bleeper reel. So it's time for change, Anthony. What are we going to do?
Well, Greg, thank you very much. And I'm particularly interested to see that you can do polls on Zooms. After 13 months of being on Zoom calls, I had no idea you had that function. But I'll be very interested in seeing the results of it. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you today. And can I just say a huge thank you to you and your team for everything that you are doing, because you are raising issues at an incredibly important time while we consider and consult as to how we produce our food, how we transport it, how we eat it, and how we get it into the places that it needs to go. And I know that Neil Parrish and Simon Jupp have joined you in previous sessions, and I would hope that we're all broadly aligned and making the same points, and to be able to reinforce the opportunity that is before us without having to bore you by making those same arguments. And I guess in the course of my remarks, I want to make a few points about the impact of COVID and how it's changed the way in which we interact with our food, our farming, and our countryside, and to be able to use those observations to be able to try and inform the decisions that we can make, both publicly as policymakers and privately as businesses and companies like yours and organizations like yours take the appropriate steps. And of course, I think many of the remarks that I have around COVID are not going to be that surprising to you all, and are probably issues that you've discussed already. But COVID has very significantly shifted and made a spotlight on the delicacy of our supply chain network. We understand now that we have to consider where and how our food arrives in our supermarkets, at our greengrocers, at our fishmongers, and at our butchers. And over the course of the last 13 months, we've not only seen the impact of panic buying, but we've had to consider where our food is coming from, how we might be able to ascertain it, and what we can do to be able to improve it, not just for environmental purposes, but actually for the benefit of our own local community. And of course, within the context of that, we've also had to discuss and to understand the need for food security. And bizarrely, in the 21st century, this is an issue that repeatedly comes to the fray, as it did during the Agriculture Bill and during the Fisheries Bill, and will come again during the Environment Bill. The need to discuss self-sustainability within the United Kingdom is becoming a more and more prominent issue. And that is something that is rightly being addressed, and I hope going to be addressed by organisations such as yours. And the third point that I want to make around this is that COVID has made us all a little bit more aware about our health, not least the food that we eat, but where it comes from and how healthy it is in the first place, and the need to be eating healthier, both in our schools, in our public bodies, but also in our private lives. And that's something that needs to be addressed, not just now, but long into the future, so that we are able to sustain those local farmers who do produce healthier food, who do produce food at a shorter supply chain. And the last point I just want to make around this is about the sustainability point. It's been a real pleasure for me to be able to get to grips with concepts such as regenerative agriculture, how we can improve at-gate farm prices, how we can improve the sustainability of local producers in the Southwest, particularly in my case, but also just across the entire country, and what impact that is going to have on the climate. And in tackling climate change. And if we can do these in the right way, we can actually bring a consensus to how we produce food, to how we tackle climate change, and to how we engage government and policymakers in addressing these issues. And of course, overall, there are no benefits to a global pandemic, and I wouldn't for a second say that there are. But it would be foolhardy for us not to take the full advantages of the fact that these changes are upon us, and that we can benefit consumer and producer alike. And so what can we actually do in the context of these awarenesses, of these changes that I've highlighted already? The first is that we can begin to create new buy local campaigns, just as that was launched recently, the Fresh Fish campaign that was launched by Defra, a fantastic opportunity for us to promote fine British seafood within the United Kingdom, something we failed to do over the last 40 years. But we need to be able to roll out campaigns across the whole of the country, from Montgomeryshire in Wales to what's going on in Scotland, to make sure that we are able to supply people with local produce and to give them the understanding of that process. The second thing which ties into this is enhancing that concept of localism. I've already mentioned it. One of the points that we need to be able to address is improving that at-gate farm price, so that farmers, producers are able to benefit from selling into a local market, who are able to, with it, give the narrative and understanding of how they're producing their food. Now, the third point I want to just touch on is being able to make sure that we are mobilizing the full weight of the state. And this is exactly what your organization is doing, Greg, is highlighting the opportunity that is there, but also connecting public and private enterprise together to be able to make sure that we can push initiatives such as the future food framework. Of course, public procurement has always been a bugbear, and since I was elected in 2019, it's been something that we've routinely raised with ministers to be able to explain why we are not buying local for schools, for public bodies, why we are not supporting the British food producing sector within our government organisations. That has to change. And the last point I want to make is that we must change habits. What has happened in the last 13 months is that we have had to quickly evaluate the changes that have actually been enforced upon us. But if that change can be sustained, then we're able to change long-term habits and to make sure that we are more self-sustainable, that we can achieve better farm prices for farmers and producers, and that we can combat climate change and all the rest that goes with it. And above all, we would also be able to address things like food poverty. So amongst all of this, there is a huge opportunity for us to change the way in which we think about food, the way in which we buy it, the way in which it's produced. And obviously Southwest Food Hub is a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to do that. And through engaging public and private cooperation, we have that opportunity by using your leadership and your determination to be able to raise this at every level, both local and national. And with the support of MPs like myself and others, we're very happy to be able to keep supporting you and actually keep raising it to government ministers in Defra and other. And of course, lastly, I just want to make the point that we have in the UK, and has been said time and time again, some of the best projects. We need to be able to make sure that we are able to use our international networks to promote that, because if we can lead by example in the run-ups to things like COP26, in our trade delegations, then we have a fantastic opportunity to not just support our farmers at home, but abroad. And so thank you very much for having me. And I hope in the course of my remarks I've made sense and touched on some of the points that you're going to be discussing later on today.
Thanks very much, Anthony, and you can feel the passion. I mean, I think it's safe to say that food has never been so high on the political agenda, and it's people like yourself that are keeping it up there. So we are very, very grateful for the support you give, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you moving on. And you've kindly said that you'll hang around today, and if people do have any specific questions, and we do have some time, then we'll come back to those questions, or we'll answer them afterwards. But thank you very much for your time. So my turn to just give you a brief overview of the Southwest Food Hub, where we are today. So I'm just going to click on my slides. I'm going to scroll a little bit up, and I'm not going to give you the full story because, you know, we're around and available all of the time for people to talk to us or come onto the online hub and find out more about us. But I thought just today I would touch on some of the background for those who join us for the first time, and a bit of an update for those who have spoken to us before. So Southwest Food Hub is a community interest company, and really much of what we do is centered around our central hub, the online hub, within which you'll find a lot of our resources. You have all the previous events that we've set up, recordings of for you to participate in, and you can contact us, read about our partners, read about our advisory board. So our advisory board, we're extremely privileged to have such a competent and capable advisory board behind us. They're extremely deeply involved in the food and drink movement throughout the Southwest. And we use them very effectively to help us to not only access the agri-food world around us, but also to make sure that we're keeping pressures on you know, central government to make sure there's sufficient motivation to bring the Future Food Framework to life. We have a statutory board as well that's make sure we spend the money properly and aren't likely to make anyone end up in prison. And then we work very closely with Crown Commercial Services, government buying team, who are behind the Future Food Framework, and as I'll come on to shortly, we'll be putting in the required infrastructure to bring it to life. And then we have a number of partners here at the bottom that have stepped forward to support us, both in terms of their expertise, in terms of their knowledge, but also in terms of resources and getting involved in events like today and making events like today happen, really. And again, you know, we'll introduce Steve shortly, who's from one of those partners. So that's our sort of structure. So what are we focused on, and what's the Future Food Framework? Not easy to say. What's it all about? Well, essentially, it's giving the public sector a tool that will enable them to broaden their purchasing capability, and at the same time, at the other end of that, opening up the supply chain so that it's more accessible to small and medium-sized producers. So how does this work? Well, at the center of it all is a technology and management system that effectively uses modern day technology to, at one end, engage and bring together all of the supply that's available and required to a specification that meets the required accreditations, and through a dynamic purchasing system allows people to enter a marketplace, producers and suppliers to enter a marketplace. At the other end, at the school, the college, the university, the military base, the prison, then the buyer can make buying decisions based on how they want to buy, what their strategies are around sustainability and maybe social value, as well as the commercial objectives, but they get a wider choice of what to buy. And the big difference is that the contracts are not long-term 3-5 year contracts. It's a dynamic system. There will be some short mini procurements with many markets within that, but the main system is based around the fact of being able to buy what you want on the day, and it's an aggregated supply across the supply base. And at the center of it all, there's a logistics processor that will effectively take what's been procured through the technology and management system, and consolidate, in some cases collect, consolidate and deliver as a one-stop drop to the public sector destination. So very, very complicated, not as straightforward as it sounds there, but that's essentially how it works. Crown Commercial Services will procure and own the platform. So effectively, it's a government-owned platform. And just to your right, you can see the key milestones which have been pushed back due to a redirection of resources for COVID, which is much understood. But now the aim is that the procurements will start to take place in the spring of this year, and things are already underway with that. And then essentially by this time next year, the marketplace should be coming to life. And our aim across that, if I just move to my next slide, is to prepare the region. And the region stretches from Gloucestershire down to the foot of Cornwall, across to Dorset and up to Swindon and Wiltshire. And so our aim, so we've broken down the area into local enterprise partnership regions just to try and make them more manageable. And then our aim is to work with those individual areas to advise, inform, and then help to prepare producers, suppliers, and public sector buyers along the way. We've got Chrissy Stories on the call, the event today, who's looking after the West of England Combined Authority area. We've got Lizzie Dyer, who I think is on the call today, but is on the ground working with producers and suppliers and procurers in the Gloucestershire area. And we've just recently secured some funding to get some feet on the ground in Cornwall, and we're working with the other partnerships to see if we can actually surface some funding to support people on the ground in those areas. And then of course we'll continue with these events, trying to run one monthly and bringing to the fore issues and information that are relevant to the preparation for the region. So that's really what we're about. I didn't want to dominate this because we really want to get on with the main presentations. But as I say, we are accessible through social media, through our website, and we'll put these details up a little bit later. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to hand over to our next speaker, Steve Ashworth from Francis Clark. Steve joined us for our last session where we were talking about how could the sector respond to Brexit. Today, he's going to touch on what some of the things coming out of the budget might mean for us. Steve not only is a very able and competent accountant and financier, but also a very able and competent chef. I've tried his prepared food, and it's very, very good. And so, Steve, I'm going to hand over to you. But the question for you first is, what do you prefer, the cooker or the calculator?
Wow, unofficially, if you turn the recording off, the cooker. But if you put the recording back on, I'll say calculator. But no, it's yeah, it's always an interesting dichotomy for me, is that one. But afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that amazing introduction again. It's always good to have somebody out there doing your PR and marketing from that point of view. So let's see if I can at least hopefully share my my slides and everything. So yeah, just by way of introduction to add what Greg has already said, I work for PKF Francis Clark. We're based across the whole of the Southwest, interestingly across most of the regions for the Southwest Food Hub. So there's a natural affinity there for what we do. I'm a tax director. I specialise in employment tax, but as a firm we do an awful lot across what is the food and drink sector, and also agriculture as well. So we've got that common links, which brings us together quite nicely. And without going into it all, when I'm not using my calculator and I am able to do a lot more in the food sector, I do cover a lot of areas across food and drink, and trying to support our food, drink, hospitality businesses and that. If anybody wants to contact me, have a chat at any time, my details are on that first slide. And I'm here today to talk about the budget in particular and what came up last week. But I will, I'm not overly promoting Francis Clark here, but I will push you towards our Francis Clark website. If you do a search for PKF Francis Clark, And if you want to read a little bit more about anything that I'm just about to do a bit of a whirlwind tour around, we do have insights into all these areas which came up out of a budget last week. Plus I noticed, and I haven't actually read this myself, but one of my colleagues in the agriculture sector has just put on this morning, companies still have a place for ambitious agribusiness despite corporation tax rises. So that might be an interesting article to just have a read of and everything as you go through. But matters in hand today. I press a button in the hope that slowly but surely the slides go down, but for some reason, no, they don't. Try again. No, not moving. Oh, there we go. Then we go. It's slow to react, and then it does all of them. Right. So, what was the budget all about? There was a lot of phrases used last week. This roadmap out of lockdown being one of them, and it was a 3-point plan that Rishi announced of protecting the jobs and the livelihoods of both businesses and individuals out there, fixing the finances and building back for this, the future economy and everything to come. There is a number of key areas where the focus and that went, where it links into the food and drink sector, but in many ways it cuts across all sectors, to be honest. But we had a lot of focus to start off with, and Rishi went straight in on what support and everything is out there. And it had already been pre-announced a weekend before about the job retention scheme, CJRS, and the self-employed income support scheme, and that this was now being extended all the way up to the end of September from its original closure date far earlier. I did have a lot of, not that I've got any crystal ball or any links into the government and health and one thing or another, but the main concern, certainly in the food and drink hospitality sector, was does this mean that we've got another lockdown to come, because he's now extended all the way to September? And that's not the reason. Well, I don't feel it's the reason. It's obviously a concern over time, but a lot of this, I think, is just to give that reassurance to businesses and individuals out there that there's a plan now through to the end of September. There is a cost when it comes to the job retention scheme, that from July, employers will be expected to contribute 10%, and then through August and September, there's a 20%. But it's removed that cliff edge which was there. And for the self-employed, it also introduced that those who had started trading during 2019-20, if they submitted their tax return prior to I think it was the 2nd of March, a couple of nights before the budget was announced, they could actually make claims under the scheme, which they couldn't do before. So we've got a phase 4 of the SEISS, which goes up to the end of April for 80% of 3 months average turnover, or profit, I should say, up to £7,500. And then there's another phase 5, which is going to be mainly aimed at those businesses where they've been severely hit on their turnover and had a 30% or more reduction in their turnover. So it may not be available to everybody for that phase 5, but it's there if it can be used, and we're waiting for more details on exactly how do you measure the fall in the turnover, etc., etc. In addition, there is the universal grants, where, again, it was a continuation of what was there before, excuse me, of the 20%, £20, per week and everything to go in there for a further 6 months. And then there's a number of grants which for hospitality, leisure, tourism, non-essential retail businesses. It's the restart grants of business rates, VAT at 5% to be set, and loans. So some of this again was pre-announced over the weekend before. Grants which local authorities are paying up to £6,000 for non-essential, up to £18,000 for hospitality and leisure. The business rate holiday, 100% relief to the end of June, and then a 2/3 cut to the end of the year. VAT frozen at 5%, and then it's going to come in from September 20 to 12.5% for up until the end of the 31st of March 2022. And a number of loans to businesses which were available to replace C-bills and bounce back. So again, there's more information available if you want to look at any of them. Go through our website if you want to have a look and just see a little bit more detail. Corporation tax, this was one of the big changes that remain at 19% until the 1st of April 2023, and then the main rate of corporation tax is going to increase to 25%. And the other main change was, and this is where Rishi and the government wanted to or needs to claw back some of the money and everything that they've paid out. And this was effectively the freezing of the personal allowances, which, okay, the increase which had already been announced up from £12,570 increased to £12,570, but this will bring a few more people at the lower end into taxation, but also mean that quite a large number of people will start to pay tax at higher rate. And this freeze will continue until April 2026. So quite a big freeze there on something which has been increasing. Although I can remember when I started my career that personal tax was down at £3,000 per year, but most of you are probably too young to actually remember that. Just covering just a few other things, just briefly. There's compliance changes. So anything which there's been a lot of money obviously paid out, and a lot, massive billions and billions of pounds paid out. And that means that compliance, which is an area as well that I specifically do a lot of work with, helping clients where the wrath of HMRCs come down on them. But besides the compliance activity which is going to take place around job retention and the SEISS, and to some extent I've seen a lot of inquiries into Eat Out to Help Out last year claims, but there is this now tax protection task force set up where 1,000 new tax investigators are being moved in and £100 million being given to them to actually start to look at the compliance activities and to watch those who are out there who have been fraudulently in many respects using job retention scheme for what it shouldn't be used for. And I did write an interesting article, again it's on our website, just around how this tax protection task force is using and really how HMRC is changing to a modern way of compliance activity. We have the dreaded off-payroll working rules. So this is anybody who's engaged and paying themselves through a personal service company and use that to provide their services to an end user. There was a glimmer of hope and that this might be kicked down the street again for another 12 months. It was supposed to come in April 20, but it's now going ahead as planned. So if any of you on here do provide your services through a personal service company to within the private sector, there are changes afoot, and you should really be well and truly set up for this. And anybody who engages you should be well and truly set up. But it's an area that I've been specifically spending a lot of time working on. So again, if anyone's got any specific questions on that, do shout. On this, supporting people, helping businesses grow, there's a lot of money being put into supporting trainees, apprentices and job seekers. And a lot of what I keep talking to businesses about really at the moment, it's all to do with recruitment, retraining their workers and rewarding their employees. And a little bit of this is to encourage new people to come through and to start young people off and apprentices just to help the business grow and look for job seekers. So, have a look at that. Funding is available. Other areas which were mentioned, national minimum wage, national living wage increased from April 2021, a 19 pence increase, £8.91. But the main change in this, just to watch out for, is that previously living wage came in at that rate I've just quoted at 25, and that's now been changed to 23. So just make sure you're ready for that change. There's anyone who's in capital allowances and has been using this from April 2021, there is this introduction of the Super Deduction, which means that sometimes you may be entitled not just to 100%, but actually 130% to be able to reclaim for your capital allowances spend. I'm sure free ports, but it might be interesting, I was thinking from the food sector, that businesses might position themselves more in and around the free ports in the areas which are there. There's incentives to do that. And Plymouth is one of the areas that we've got, also across into the Solent. So it might be worth looking and seeing if free ports is something which is an advantage there. And just finally, there was a whole raft. Really, the other part of the Rishi's budget talk and everything was really on, besides his protecting the jobs and the livelihood, it was providing extensions to many of the tax breaks which had come in, which really revolve around home working, extensions to people who are working at home, cycle to work schemes, the EMI scheme, which is a good way for many small businesses to reward and incentivize their employees. And again, all of these have all been extended. Statutory sick pay also extended for how much you can claim back for the first couple of weeks. So there's all raft there in extensions, but just in case it interests anybody on EMI, there was a call for evidence to work. EMI is a way of giving options to share options to incentivize employees to help and grow with your business. But there is a call for evidence around whether that the EMI is working in the current format and whether it needs to be changed and tweaked. So that call of evidence, if it's something which interests you, is worth having a look at. And that is it, really. That's a whistle-stop tour, even of that.
It's easy for you to say, Steve.
Yeah, easy for me to say. Yeah. So there you go.
Thanks very much, Steve. Insightful as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Tight for time, so I'm just going to really quickly introduce the Defra team. South West Food Hub works really closely with Defra. This is a fairly new team. I think they've brought a sort of an injection of energy into the Defra side of things, and they're very keen to engage with the South West Food Hub and Future Food Frameworks pilot. So I'm going to hand over to Defra. James, Helena, take it away.
Great, thanks, Greg. Hi everyone, it's good to be here today, and it's nice to see a few faces who we've spoke to recently as well from various different groups. So that's great. I'm going to kind of give an overview of the work we do in the public sector food procurement team in Defra. But before doing so, I'll just introduce my colleagues. So Helena, do you want to go first and just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there. My name's Helena. I'm a recent joiner to this team at Defra. My past is having been a vet actually down in Cornwall, farm vet primarily. Yeah, it's good. So I'm leading on the consultation to update the government's food buying standards and working very closely with Ellen and James as well. So Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Helena. So yeah, I'm Ellen and I sit within James's team at Defra, working on public sector food procurement policy. And yeah, just to say thanks again to Greg and the team for having us here today. It's great to speak.
Great, thanks both. So I'll do sort of introduction to the work we do, and then Helena is going to do the proper bit of the discussion, the interesting stuff. So I'll get my bit out of the way quickly for you all. But just to say, we sort of want to run this as a discussion. We're not sort of coming here with all the answers. We're really keen to kick off a discussion with you and get your thoughts about how we ensure that the procurement standards, which we use as part of the future food framework are not a barrier to entry, but are easy to engage with, cut down on the sort of paperwork, and just make it nice and easy to get onto the scheme. So yeah, we want to kind of start that discussion, and we'll come back in I think the June session as well, if Greg will have us, to kind of feedback based on the discussions we've had today and in the meantime. So just in terms of really briefly what the public sector food procurement looks like. So it's a really wide range of organisations, spans all across the public sector. So NHS, canteens, MOD, Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Justice, schools and others. So our standards which underpin public sector food procurement naturally have to be quite broad, because we are covering from a squaddie on patrol who might be on 5,000 calories a day to myself and colleagues sitting in the Defra canteen where I might like 4,000 calories a day, but I can't justify it as well. So it's all about the kind of nutritional balance, etc. There's around about £2.4 billion spent on public sector food procurement. And from the sort of pie chart on the slide, around 80% is spent between the NHS and education. So they're the two big areas of procurement within the public sector. And as Anthony touched on at the start, we've got several kind of government manifesto commitments in this area. So we're committed to getting more local companies, more local producers into the sector, and also more small and medium-sized enterprises, which is why we're really excited to be working with Greg and the Crown Commercial Services on the trial in the region, because it fits really nicely into both of those objectives. Also, just more broadly, it's a very exciting time for public sector procurement. We had a recent parliamentary inquiry into public sector food. You may have come across something called the National Food Strategy or the Independent Food Review. They are due to report shortly on public sector food procurement as well. And we're also, as Helena touched on, consulting in the summer to update our standards. So there's an awful lot going on in this space, which makes it a really exciting time to be getting involved with it. Okay, so I'll cover this really briefly because you could spend a whole session on this, but our current standards are set out within the Government Buying Standards for Food and Catering Services, known as a GBSF, and an accompanying document called a Balanced Scorecard. And the aim essentially between these two documents is to set out a range of criteria from nutrition to animal welfare and sustainability, and to balance those against cost. So our aim within Defra is that price is not the only driver. It's a balance of all the good things which we want in our food supply, and which producers in the UK excel at as well. And as I say, we'll be consulting and updating these documents later in the year. So I'll skip on to the next one. And so Greg has run through many of the benefits of the trial. So I'll not kind of go through them all, but I think one I'll pick up on is around simplicity. And this is a benefit both to procurers and suppliers, is we really want to make, as we're saying at the start, the processes as simple as possible. So we've had feedback that our standards can be quite complex, particularly if you're a small company. And we really want to kind of, as part of this discussion, understand how we can make the process of supplying to the public sector easier, simpler. And one way we're looking at doing that is through the use of assurance schemes. And on that note, I will hand over to Helena, who's going to go into more detail. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so we're looking at assurance schemes because we're hoping it is a way to simplify the procurement process in the Future Food Framework. So the idea is that assurance schemes can be used as evidence to demonstrate that you meet certain standards that are within the government food buying standards. We hope that it will be possible that one scheme can act as evidence for multiple standards. However, we have to sort of state that certification with an assurance scheme, it doesn't guarantee you a sector contract, but it can just make the process more simple. So I think a little infographic here just to sort of make that a little bit clearer. Really, as we've mentioned, we want this to be a discussion now. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and they're the ones that were provided beforehand. And I'd just really like to hear from you. I know that in the audience we have got, sorry, a number of producers. We've also got some public sector buyers as well. So if you'd like to sort of input into the discussion, you can do that either by putting your virtual hand up and I'll ask you to speak, or write your comments or questions into the chat box, and Ellen hopefully is going to keep an eye on that because I'm not very good at multitasking. So first question, what are the main barriers to small businesses and local businesses supplying food to the public sector currently? Now I realise this one's quite broad and you know there are really multiple factors at play here, but does anyone in the virtual room want to sort of kick off with some of their ideas on that? If no one's willing to pipe up, I'll rope in Greg.
Paperwork, administration.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you meant about me piping in?
Yes, no, that's great, thank you. I'm just checking there's no one else. That's right. So yes, the paperwork side of things is exactly what we're looking to improve when it comes to the consultation that we're leading this summer. So the buying standards, as James sort of outlined, fall across in one document called the GPSF. And then there is this balanced scorecard as a separate document, and they're both quite lengthy, meaty pieces of paperwork. And so we're hoping that, as well as perhaps updating and sort of refreshing some of the standards in there, that we can actually update them in a way that makes them more user-friendly. Ken, you've got your hand up. Would you like to chip in?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm Ken Henderson. I work for Northumberland County Council, but I lead on Northumberland, which is a food and drink verification scheme. Now, what I'm finding within Northumberland, getting into public sector and also getting into supermarkets, etc., is the cost to SMEs of assurance schemes, such as SALSA, BRC, and various other ones. We've been doing a lot of work up in Northumberland because we can actually verify all three things that you've just said there, but our verification scheme isn't accepted at the moment by public sector. We're doing a lot of work there, but you know, we actually follow, when we're doing audits, we're looking at the standards, we're looking at animal welfare, and I can even do cattle tracing system to actually prove the, you know, the origin and the provenance of the actual product. I just think that, you know, the cost of our scheme is minimal compared to the cost of some of the bigger ones like BRC and SALSA. So it would be useful if the government, you know, when you're doing this consultation, could accept some of the verification schemes that's run by some of the regional areas. I think that would be very useful because cost is the main thing for SMEs. Yeah.
Yeah, completely understand. That's a very interesting point. Thanks, Ken, for raising that. I'm interested to know, how many other sort of assurance schemes like yours exist in terms of more local ones?
There's quite a few, but from what we've done in research, I think there's very few actually do a full check, a physical check for traceability, animal welfare, and things like that, which we would do. And you know, it's working really well for our producers in Northumberland because, you know, when you're talking about expanding for export, getting that regional brand, and you know, we're around about a tenth of the cost of, you know, I mean, it's subsidized by the local authority as well, you know, to try and get businesses, get that provenance, and would really like a simpler system that could be operated at a much reduced cost, you know.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I see another hand up there, Fidelity Western. Would you like to join in?
Hi, yes, thank you. As you say, I'm Fidelity Western. I'm chairman of the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association. And so we are a membership group of about 650, mainly farmers, rearing their ruminants entirely off grass. And we have a certification scheme called Pasture for Life, which is probably the nearest one to it is the Soil Association Organic or OFG Organic. So it's a proper accredited assurance scheme. And we have a total traceability from birth to fork. You know, you can know exactly where your animal's been. We are just setting up as a regional group. So one of the things we really want to try and do is to get the supply from our farms going across. And we think by doing it on a regional basis, we have got more chance of working together in order to create a sort of more consistent supply. So when you're talking about assurance schemes, would something like that just do it for you? I mean, we're inspected every year. Many of our members won't be red tractor or anything like that, for instance, but they will all be rearing their livestock to an extremely high standard and producing very nutrient dense ruminant meat because it's entirely, or milk, it's entirely off pasture.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
certainly it's something that we would like to sort of learn more about and see how that can fit in with what we're doing. I'm interested to know a bit more about, you said some of the people that are assured under your scheme aren't red tractor assured. Is that something that is due to the cost of being members of both things, or what that?
Well, I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, it might be the cost, but I mean, we're registered, we're certified with the Soil Association and Pasture for Life. I would say that Red's Tractor is just proving that we're basically complying with the law. And of course, we're complying with the law, and we're going way above that by meeting the standards of those other two certification schemes. So I would feel extremely annoyed at having to do what I see as tick box exercise through the Red Tractor just to prove that I'm basically complying with the law, and I would feel that anyone can come and see that we definitely are. So I think, you know, these certification schemes, you can belong to, they can take up days of work in being inspected, and there becomes a point when you belong to a scheme that's of such a high standard, you don't need to do it. Of course, if you're supplying a supermarket or somebody like that, then they might insist that you are, but it is just a very frustrating extra, yet another inspection that you have to give time up to do, and of course pay money for as well.
No, I absolutely appreciate that. So yeah, I think it is really important that we can somehow encompass these assurance schemes which are going above and beyond the Red Tractor certification. Ellen, I can see you've got your hand up. Was there something from the chat or?
Yeah, just thought I'd flag quite a few useful comments coming in about these main barriers, and I see there's quite a lot of repetition as well, and so yeah, there's a lot of agreement on what these are. So some of that is around the size of lots for current public procurement, which we can talk about in terms of the Future Food Framework and splitting up of those lots. So I don't know if we want to start with that one.
Yes, is that something that James might want to respond to, or Greg, in fact, being the expert?
Yeah, I mean, I think I tried to touch on it and probably whizzed over it a bit quickly, but you know, the benefit of the Future Food Framework is that supply is aggregated and consolidated through the IT and through the logistics provider. So it's not a particular contract for a particular institution. It can be many producers coming together within an aggregated supply. So that's one of the benefits of opening it up. There will be mini competitions for particular commodity style lines, but they'll be only sort of months long rather than years long. So that's one of the benefits that the Future Food Framework brings to the table.
I think maybe a nice segue as well onto our next question, Helena, getting a few comments in around the cost of accreditation schemes as a potential barrier. So it'd be great if we could touch on that a little bit.
Yes, I've just moved on to the next question because how can we use assurance schemes to simplify the procurement process and to promote best practice? I think this, you know, it's almost the same discussion, really, isn't it? So I think it's about, from what I can hear people saying, is it's about sort of allowing all the different assurance schemes to sort of weigh in and be mapped according to our standards, and that is something that we are doing, and we will be sort of consulting further on. Is there anything else that has come out of the chat, Ellen? So I can't see it, which is not helpful.
Yeah, there's lots coming out actually. So it sounds more generally that assurance schemes are a good avenue, but like you say, I think it's about which ones we recognise and the costs associated with those. Gavin, you've just put in about any of the work going on at Elms at Defra on this as well, and I just touch on the fact that we are looped in with the Elms team, but we're working on slightly different timeframes for this. So it is an area that we are linking up across Defra on. But yeah, we're just hopefully looking to implement this for the Future Food Framework, so we're on a bit of a shorter time scale. But yeah, definitely linking up on that.
James, did you have something to chip in with there?
Yeah, thanks, Helena. It's been really useful so far, which is great. I think just to pick up on a couple of the comments and from the chat, but also the conversation, I guess, yeah, we're really keen that this isn't, assurance schemes don't become sort of tick box exercise, and we're not going to be prescribing kind of one particular scheme over another. I guess this is about, we've got a standards, which we've talked about, set out in the government buying standards, and any assurance scheme which meets those standards could potentially be used to demonstrate compliance. So I think there's another comment around kind of the standards are constantly changing, and sort of recognise that as an issue. But I guess what we're trying to do is not change the standards, but just find different ways to simplify meeting them in particular. So yeah, just wanted to add that in. Thanks.
I have now been able to see the chat. I was just wondering whether, Greg, you might be able to comment further on Sarah's comment about technology linking distribution networks for transport and logistics, and how the Future Food Framework kind of tries to plug that gap a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to interpret the question is the logistics provision will be through a procurement, through a tender process specifically for the logistics service, and there will be accreditations and standards that have to be met for that. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot, I mean ourselves, with yourselves at Defra, is making sure that through this review we sort of identify, the relevance of this question is we identify what accreditations fit where in the supply chain, and we know that some are specifically focused on primary production. We know that some are specifically there for processors and manufacturers like SALSA and BRC that was referred to, and that some are more appropriate for logistics providers. And then of course you've got things like Food for Life that are focused around the caterers and what food they put on the plate. So I think one of the things here is to try and really, through the review, which I know is your ambition, is to really make sure that horses for courses are measured up. So the answer is that there will be specific accreditations appropriate to logistics providers.
Great, thank you for that answer, Greg. Hopefully that was useful to some people. Just again looking in the chat, please, as I said, do put your hand up if you want to sort of speak up verbally. Got someone who's messaged me about something called Happily. Alison, I don't mean to pick on you, but would you mind speaking up in the virtual room to explain a little bit about what that is? Because it's something I don't know that I'm aware of at the moment.
Yeah, it's something that Happily got in touch with us as Deliciously Yorkshire, so we're regional food group for Yorkshire and Humber, probably about a year or so ago. So they are offering a sort of independent, if you like, accreditations, which sits independently of any other assurance and accreditation scheme. just kind of looking to track across the supply chain and across each ingredient within a product to be able to identify provenance and to give some transparency, really. So to be fair, I've not spoken with the individuals involved in that for a few months now, but I just wondered if it was on your radar at all, and if not, I'd be happy to facilitate some introductions.
That could be really useful. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, James, because you've been working on this for longer than I have, but I don't know that we're linked in with them yet. Could be something to look into.
Southwest Food Hub is linked to Happily, so we can
okay.
Fill you in a bit more about that. But yeah, that's a great recommendation, I think, and we can certainly share. They're doing some innovative things around traceability and what have you. So yeah, we can share that with you. Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so it seems like assurance schemes could be useful, but obviously the cost of them and the sort of the diversity within the landscape of assurance schemes is where the complexity lies and where the sort of barriers are and the difficulties for producers and suppliers. So obviously, as I said, we really at the beginning of this process now having a conversation about how we improve the buying standards and how we create a set of standards that's easy for small and local suppliers to use and therefore access the public sector. So the final question to pose is, what kind of guidance should Defra be providing to support specifically small producers and the procurers trying to buy from them as well, and what kind of lead times would you need on this? So do you need a sort of a whole year run up to get ready for this, or how's that? I will say, Ellen, I've lost the chat again, so if you want to read any comments out, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. Thank you. And just cautious of time as well. So if anyone does think of anything beyond this session, then yeah, please do feel free to contact us or contact Southwest Food Hub on this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're more than happy to sort of take further contacts and have conversations beyond this today as well. As I said, it's really beginning, and the public consultation, which is due to happen this summer, we will invite everyone to submit responses to that as well. That will be a little bit broader than this conversation today. Okay, well, I don't think we've got anyone keen to answer this question, but perhaps it's something that will come up in our later conversations. So I'm happy now to pass back to Greg because we are running out of time.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think just sitting here, with a production background, I think that over time it will become clearer as to what we're aiming at. And then I think armed with that, people will be probably more able to say how long it might take for that transition. But I think the key thing to come through today is that there's an engagement here, like, we know that this opportunity is kind of a sort of a once in a lifetime to really open up public sector procurement. And part of that is really nailing what are the entry level standards. And then, what are then the ladders of standards that are appropriate to be in play. And so that's why I'm grateful you guys have come along today. It is the start of the process. So as James alluded to earlier, we'll bring you back and keep engaging with people along the way, if that's okay. Can I ask you to unshare, Helen, if that's all right? And then I'm going to round up. But thanks very much to James, Ellen and Helena from the Defra team. And as they alluded to, we'll happily take and share comments with them on your behalf, or try and help and support with that as well. And also we'll keep updates through the Southwest Food Hub website as well. So mindful of time, and we're just a couple of minutes over. So I'd like to thanks to the Defra team as I just have. Thanks to Steve Ashworth for joining us from Francis Clark, and thanks to Anthony Manuel as well for coming along and opening up the show, as they say. Thanks to Ellen in the background, who's worked really hard to bring it all together. Keep in touch with us, pose us the tricky questions. Our goal really here is to iron out all of those creases before the platform goes live and be really ready for the Southwest to embrace the Future Food Framework and make the most of the opportunity for small and medium-sized producers. So keep in touch with us. And we'll be running another event on the 14th of April, and there may well be another event in between then as well. So again, sign up for the mail shots, and we'll keep in touch with you as well. So thanks again for bearing with us, and we'll be back with you again soon.